Kaala's revenge, a bond stronger than blood. The sun had just begun to set over Ranaigarh, painting the sky in hues of red and orange. The village was small, hidden between dense forests, where time seemed frozen. Sitting outside his worn-out hut, Rahman Baba, an old man with a weathered face and sorrowful eyes, tossed a piece of roti toward Kaala, his loyal dog. "Here, my boy," he said softly, stroking Kaala's head. "You are the only one left in my life." Kaala, a huge black dog with fiery amber eyes, wagged his tail and licked Rahman Baba's hand before devouring his meal. He was more than a pet. He was family, a protector, a son. But across the street, Jamal, the village brute, watched them with disgust. "Look at this," he spat, nudging his friend Kaleem. "An old man treats a filthy mutt better than he treats us." Kaleem smirked. "That's because this mutt is the only one who loves him." Jamal's face twisted with hatred. "He doesn't deserve love. Not from a dog, not from anyone." His words carried poison, and that poison soon turned into a plan. The storm before the blood. It was a night of thunder and rage. Rain poured mercilessly, and lightning split the sky in two. Inside his hut, Rahman Baba hummed an old song, sipping on his warm milk, while Kaala lay beside him, ears perked up. Something was wrong. Then, a loud bang on the door. Kaala growled, his muscles tense. Before Rahman Baba could stand up, the door burst open. Jamal and his men rushed in like wild animals, their eyes filled with malice. Rahman Baba rose to his feet, his frail body trembling. "What do you want?" Jamal sneered. "That filthy mutt of yours. It's time we teach him his place." Kaala lunged at them, but the men were prepared. They threw a net over him, dragging him outside. The dog thrashed, growled, barked, but they were too many. "Let him go!" Rahman Baba shouted, his voice breaking. He grabbed Jamal's arm, but the younger man shoved him to the ground. The old man hit his head against a rock, blood trickling down his face. "Please," he begged, "don't hurt him." Jamal laughed darkly. "You love this beast, don't you?" He pulled out a thick rope and threw it over a tree branch. Kaala, now tied and helpless, let out a heart-wrenching howl, his golden eyes staring at his master, pleading, desperate, betrayed. Then with one vicious pull, they hanged him. The storm raged on, but nothing drowned out Rahman Baba's screams. The rope tightened. Kaala's body jerked, twisted, convulsed. His paws clawed at the air, his eyes losing their glow. Jamal and his men watched, their laughter drowned by the thunder. And then Kaala went still. The rain washed his blood into the dirt. Jamal spat at his lifeless body. "Not so tough now, are you?" Rahman Baba crawled to his beloved Kaala, his hands shaking, his breath ragged. He placed a trembling hand on Kaala's head. His best friend was gone, and something inside Rahman Baba snapped forever. The curse. For 7 nights, Rahman Baba did not sleep, did not eat, did not speak. He sat by Kaala's grave, whispering to the earth, cursing, pleading, promising revenge. And then on the 8th night, he vanished. Some said he went into the Blackwood forest, where spirits roamed. Others believed he had called upon something ancient and terrible. But what happened next? That was no legend. It was a nightmare. The blood moon rises. The first to die was Kaleem. His body was found ripped apart, his face frozen in pure horror. The second was Bashir. His house was found drenched in blood, deep claw marks on the walls. The third, Jamal's own brother, half-eaten, bones crushed, flesh missing. Fear gripped the village. And then people saw it, a giant black hound, its fur soaked in blood, its golden eyes glowing like fire. It never barked, never howled. It only stared, waiting, watching. And when the moon turned red, it hunted, the final hunt. Jamal's escape. Jamal ran like a hunted animal. His heart pounded in his chest, sweat dripping down his face. The night was silent, too silent. He had seen it. That thing wasn't just a dog. It was something else now, something monstrous. His hands trembled as he bolted his doors, barricaded the windows, and loaded his rifle. He sat in the dark, his breath uneven. "It's just my mind playing tricks on me," he whispered. Then a soft thud outside. His blood turned to ice. The wind howled, a branch snapped. Then, scraping, something was clawing at his door. Jamal gripped his rifle, aiming it toward the entrance. His chest heaved. "It can't get in, it can't—" Scratch. A single claw mark appeared on the wooden door. Then another. Then the door creaked open. But no one was there. Jamal's pulse roared in his ears. He stepped forward, rifle shaking in his grip. "Who's there?" he called out. His voice wasn't his own. It was weak, broken, desperate. Silence. Then behind him, a breath, warm, close, waiting. Jamal turned slowly. Golden eyes stared back at him. Kaala was inside. The final judgment. Jamal staggered back, his mind refusing to believe what he saw. The beast before him was larger than any dog, its fur black as death, dripping with blood. Its teeth gleamed in the candlelight, sharp enough to tear through bone. But worst of all, it was smiling. "Stay back," Jamal choked, raising his rifle. "Stay back." Kaala tilted his head, amused. Then he spoke. "Did you think I forgot?" Jamal's knees buckled. His mind screamed that it wasn't real. Dogs don't talk. The dead don't return. But Kaala wasn't a dog anymore. He took a step forward. "Did you think I forgave?" Jamal fired the rifle. Boom! The bullet passed straight through Kaala. Like smoke. Like a nightmare. Kaala laughed. A deep, guttural sound that rattled the walls. "Bullets won't save you, Jamal." Jamal threw his rifle, sprinting toward the door. But it slammed shut on its own. The candle flames flickered out. Darkness. The last thing the villagers heard was Jamal's scream, long, raw, and filled with terror. By morning, his house was ruined, the walls clawed apart. "Jamal?" Gone. No body, no blood. Just the faint scent of wet fur and burning wood. The curse lives on. The villagers whispered about what happened that night. Kaala took him to hell, some said. "Jamal now runs in the forest, forever hunted," others whispered. But no one dared to speak against Kaala's name. And then, on certain nights, when the wind howled through the trees, people swore they could hear. Growling. A deep, monstrous growl, as if Kaala was still waiting. For the next sinner, for the next betrayer, for the next hunt. Kaala's Revenge, Part 2, The Shadow Returns. Prologue, the fear never left. Years had passed since Jamal's mysterious disappearance. The village of Ranaigarh had changed. Houses were rebuilt, children played in the streets, and the fields flourished once more. But one thing never changed, the fear. No one spoke of that night, no one whispered Kaala's name, because even now on silent nights the villagers still heard, growling, and when the moon turned red, doors were bolted shut, and prayers were whispered in trembling voices. For they knew Kaala was still watching, and soon he would return. The stranger in the village. One evening under a fading sun, a stranger arrived in Ranaigarh, a tall, hooded man, his face hidden beneath a heavy cloak. He carried nothing but a wooden staff and piercing eyes that seemed to see through souls. His presence sent a shiver through the villagers. He walked to the tea stall where Farooq Chacha, the oldest man in the village, sat with a trembling cup in his hand. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the stranger said, his voice deep, unsettling. Farooq Chacha's fingers tightened around his cup. "Ghosts don't walk among us." The stranger smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "No? Then tell me, what haunts this village?" The tea stall fell silent. No one spoke, no one dared. But the stranger leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me about Kaala." Farooq Chacha turned pale, the cup in his hand slipped, shattering on the ground. "Leave," he whispered, "before it's too late." But the stranger only smiled. "Too late," he said. "Oh, old man, it has already begun." The new sin. That same night something terrible happened. A dog was found dead. Not just dead, slaughtered. Its body hung from the same tree where Kaala had been killed, its golden eyes staring lifelessly at the sky. The villagers gasped in horror, some clutching their chests in disbelief. "Who would do this?" someone whispered. But in their hearts they already knew. The curse had been awakened, and Kaala was coming back. The first death. The next night, the first man died. His name was Ibrahim, a hunter known for his cruelty to animals. His body was found outside his hut, his face twisted in sheer terror. But the worst part? His throat had been ripped open, but there was no blood. Just deep claw marks on the walls, as if something huge had dragged itself inside and taken him. The villagers knew what this meant. Kaala was back, and he was angry. the stranger's truth. The villagers ran to the stranger, begging for answers. "You knew this would happen," they accused. The stranger lifted his hood, and for the first time they saw his face. He was young, but his eyes, his golden eyes, were ancient. "I did not come to start this," he said. "I came because Kaala called me." A hush fell over the crowd. "Who are you?" someone asked. The stranger smirked. "I am his blood, his kin, his vengeance." A chill ran through the villagers. This was not just a man. This was Kaala's legacy, and he had come to finish what was started, the final judgment. The next night the village was silent. Everyone stayed locked inside their homes, clutching prayers, trembling in fear. But one house stood alone, the house of Rashid, the man who had killed the second dog. The villagers watched from their windows as a shadow moved toward Rashid's home. Not walking, gliding, the doors of Rashid's house swung open on their own. The villagers heard screaming, the sound of claws tearing flesh, and then silence. When dawn arrived, Rashid was gone. But deep in the forest, a single paw print burned into the earth. A message, a warning. Kaala had returned, and this time he would never leave. The legend lives forever. The village of Ranaigarh changed forever after that night. No more dogs were harmed, no more sins were committed, because they knew Kaala was always watching, and when the red moon rose again, he would return. To hunt the wicked, to bring justice, and to ensure that his name would never be forgotten. The end.